story according to Officer Wilson.
Our legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Sunny Hostin is joining us now from Ferguson. Good morning to you, Sunny. We know you've had a chance to look over reams and reams of paper of this testimony. I'm sure there were things that really struck you in there. What stood out the most to you?
Well, there were a lot of things, Michaela, that struck me and stood out to me, but I'd like to back up and put it into context. When a prospective defendant gets in front of the grand jury, which is rare, a prosecutor then has the opportunity to cross-examine that person, to test that person's version of events, because you know if you're a prospective defendant, you have incentive to try to put your best foot forward. You have incentive to not be credible, to not be truthful. That is not what happened here, quite frankly, in reading the grand jury testimony of Officer Wilson. He was not tested by the prosecutor. He was not cross-examined. He was treated with kid gloves. He was tossed a lot of softballs, and in fact, the more difficult questions came from the grand jurors themselves. So in light of that, what was striking to me was that his testimony just seemed to be very fanciful. He described what we had never heard before, which is that he had been struck with full force 2 times. The 3rd time he thought could be a fatal strike, yet his injuries seemed inconsistent with that kind of force, Michaela. He also described that he thought he saw Michael Brown reaching into his waistband, which is something, unfortunately, that police officers often say to justify shooting someone. However, one of the grand jurors asked Officer Wilson whether he felt or thought that Michael Brown had a weapon, and Officer Wilson responded that he hadn't thought of that. So when you really take a look at the testimony and the context, it just appears to be very self-serving, quite frankly, and fanciful and just not credible.